Hey everyone, this is Gary Smith. Welcome to my YouTube channel where I talk about purpose as it relates to your career, your finances, and your life. Today, my special guest is Dom Monkhouse. Dom is a business coach and the founder of Monkhouse Company. And today we're talking about vision and purpose. Are they the same thing? And how do they relate to the success or failure of your business? Come on in and join the conversation. Good day, everyone, and welcome to another podcast session. Today, my special guest is Dom Monkhouse from over in the UK. Dom is a successful businessman. He's also the founder of a business coaching company called Monkhouse Company. So as we get started today, first of all, Dom, good morning to you from Connecticut. Good afternoon to you in the UK. Thanks very much for taking time to spend a few minutes with me today.
Gary, I'm absolutely delighted.
So as we get started, Dom, why don't you give our viewers just a quick sketch of who you are, what you've done, and how Monkhouse Company came to be?
Blimey, I could go a long way back. I did agriculture at university, and then I found myself in retail. I found myself in fast-moving consumer goods. I traveled the world, ended up in Australia, and in Australia I found myself in IT. Came back to the UK. I started as a Texas-based business called Rackspace. I founded sort of the UK end of that. We got that business to about 30 million in 5 years. Did a turnaround in another IT business, managed services business in London. Then founded the UK end of a Canadian business called Pier 1 Hosting. Took that to about 30 million in 5 years. We took the whole business to about $200 million and exited it about 8 years ago. And then, because I'd used these tools to help build these businesses rapidly, I thought I might create a coaching business and we might help other people. The purpose there is that to demystify business growth. And that's what I try to do. So I work as a coach. I have a podcast. I've written some books, weekly newsletter and blog posts, just to try and help people scale their organizations with less drama.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I was visiting your website, and by the way, folks, if you get a chance, visit the website. It's just monkhouseandcompany.com. It's a great place where you can get some good resources. But a couple of things that hit me there that we can sort of use to start our conversation this morning, Dom, relative to purpose is you said that you help leaders with vision overcome the obstacles that prevent them from reaching their full potential. And the other thing that I liked is that there's a little pop-up on your website that says, sort of answer these 10 questions to determine if your business is going to crush it or if you're going to be crushed. And so I guess a couple of leading questions. The first one is one that I get fairly often, and that is vision and purpose, are they the same thing? And number two is when you are talking with people and you're in a situation where you see a company that's in danger of being crushed, how often does lack of purpose play into that impending failure?
Okay, I'll take the first one first. So I think I'm an entrepreneur, and most of my clients are entrepreneurs. And so one of the things about being an entrepreneur is you have some vision of the world, right? And so I think the vision thing is sort of playing two things here. One is that, and often those entrepreneurs are, they're not planners, right? So most entrepreneurs, you can't get them in a planning meeting. One of the tools that we use is Working Genius. And in there, you sort of take the entrepreneur who might have invention as one of their geniuses. So they get a dopamine hit when they have an idea. They don't get a dopamine hit when they have a plan. and so I'm sort of talking to people who know they love having ideas, and I know that, you know, oh look, squirrel, or shiny penny syndrome, right? And their teams are driven to distraction. One of the guys who used to work for me, Scott Davies, who was my VP of customer experience, used to say to me, Dom, good idea, but not for today. And so, but I suppose if you think about, you know, vision, mission, values, purpose, those sort of various terms, I use, because they're used interchangeably all of the time. So what I do is I stick to the definition that Jim Collins uses, which is that purpose is the why you're in business, and then what he calls BHAG is your mission. So the purpose is the why, and then your mission or your BHAG is the sort of 10 to 25 year destination that you're aiming for. Then you've got core values, which is the how you do it. And he says all of those things are your business vision. And so if I stick to that, then when I use language, I'm being consistent about how I'm describing things. So I think that all entrepreneurs have, in that case, have a vision, because they have you know, you have to have some purpose to start a business, otherwise you wouldn't. You know, that you've got a higher risk appetite for risk than maybe people who are CEOs of a business after it's been founded. But you know, if you're an entrepreneur and a founder, you've taken some risk, and you must have some idea that you're trying to solve a problem, otherwise you wouldn't have started a business. Now, I mean, occasionally I meet people who say, do you know what, Dom, I started this business because I needed a job. And they go hunting for purpose. But often there's something in there about how they behave as human beings. We worked with a commercial tiling organization, and the CEO said he was searching for a purpose, but actually, when we sort of chipped away at it, they already had a piece of their business which was about sustainability. So, you know, tiles get shipped to building sites on wooden pallets, and they would collect those and recycle them, and they'd generate that money, and they'd buy TVs for the children's hospital. So they already had and so that was sort of a bit of a drag. If you didn't like doing that, then that might be, as sort of a site foreman, you could see how picking up pallets and recycling them could be a bit of a drag. But if you were lined up with that as a purpose, and you could see that recycling wooden pallets rather than burning them or putting them in landfill was a good thing, you know, you can see how then becomes a values connection between the people who are going to be great site foremen and the way in which the business is set up. And then he's trying to leave some sort of legacy, and so there were no apprenticeship schemes for tilers. So he'd hired a load of youngsters and he created an apprenticeship program. And so, you know, although he said he didn't have a purpose, actually, when you scratched it, it was there. You know, it was he was creating a legacy. He was trying to run his business in a sustainable way, which was very different to his competitors. And it was, what he couldn't do is he just hadn't articulated it.
Right.
And so that was it. So that's been interesting. But and I've got another client who I'm working with at the moment where they're trying to do some succession planning, and this is at an individual level rather than at a company level. But I said, you know, what's your vision for the organization 5 years from now? And the guy I was talking to said, I don't know that I've got one. And I said, but there's a bit of this job that you're not going to enjoy doing. And the thing is, the purpose will sustain you when it's tough, right? Because it's that, you know, you look at, why do people raise money for charity? You know, they'll go and do an ultra marathon, or, they'll all sorts of things for a higher purpose. People are prepared to be miserable, put up with personal discomfort, and without a purpose, if it's just a job, then if it gets miserable, you probably go and get another one.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right on target there, in that a lot of people have the why, they have the purpose, but oftentimes I think what happens is it gets covered up by the mundane of the day to day. And so we need sometimes someone like you or someone like me to come in and sort of help them dust that off and realize why they started this venture in the first place. And I think another good point that you make, Dom, is that there's a difference between the entrepreneurs, the creators, who are the ones who have the idea and have the vision for adding value to, to things. I think of, Steve Jobs at Apple talking about, making, using Apple to make a unique dent in the universe. There's a huge difference between people like that with that mindset and people who are CEOs of organizations who are there because it's a job, and in effect they've maybe inherited a vision from somebody else, but they really haven't taken ownership. Is that sort of what you find?
Yeah, I think so. I think if the founder is still in the business, then, and they haven't got a clearly articulated purpose, then I sort of say, okay, tell me your garage story, right? So like, where were you? What were you doing? Who were you doing it with when your idea to create this business occurred to you? And what was the problem you were trying to solve? And I think there's a great definition of entrepreneurs, which is they take the use of assets. They use assets more. They're aiming to use assets more efficiently, whereas bureaucrats or bureaucracy reduces the efficiency of asset use. And so in there, there'll be, what were you trying to do? Was it time? Was it money? Often there's a personal aggravation that they're trying to solve for, and they think there must be more people like them. And quite often you're able to get them to articulate that really clearly. And maybe if you were in the first half a dozen people hired when they had that idea and they started the business, it was really commonly understood. Right. But often it just gets forgotten. And I remember working with the CEO of a business called 𝙁𝙊𝙇𝙊𝙇𝙊𝙁, James, and there we were with his leadership team. And he told the story. And I said to the rest of them, how many of you have heard this story before? And they all looked at him and went, we've never heard this story before. And so they launched their business. It was about making marketing more efficient. It was allowing e-commerce vendors to compete with Amazon. And previously they'd been developing marketing software inside a big ad agency and felt that customers were being ripped off. And so they wanted to sort of democratize e-commerce, if you like, and make it easy for small guys to compete and do well. And he starts talking about it and he gets excited and his team are excited, and all of a sudden people feel they're on a crusade, and it's no longer just about selling a thing for a few bucks. It's actually we're out to change the world. We're about this is about making a dent in the universe. We've got customers who are disadvantaged if they don't buy our software, and our salespeople should feel proud to be ringing people up to try and help them. And that's completely different to people ringing up saying, hey, we've got this thing that you don't want. Can I try and persuade you to buy it? Right. Miserable. People say no. But what if I did some work for a corporate finance house, and they're all accountants. And I'd been asked to go and help them to learn to sell. And so I turned up and I said, hey, I'm here to help you learn to sell. And I said, tell me about sales. And they went, sales? Oh, sleazy, horrible, manipulative. I went, okay, stop, wind up. I said, why does this company exist? What is the purpose of this organization? And this is without any of the senior people in the room. So there's about 30 or 35 people in various sessions that I spoke to, and they were very, very consistent about this. And they said, look, we typically get hired to sell companies for entrepreneurs. This entrepreneur will only be selling their company once. Our purpose is to maximize the lifetime value that this entrepreneur has accrued in their business. And we believe that if they give us the opportunity to sell it for them, we'll get more money for them. We'll extract more value than any of our competitors. And I said, wow, that's fascinating. And they said, that's why we're here, because we could have stayed at EY or PwC or Deloitte. And we could have, their purpose there was to make our partners more money, but we've come here because we want to serve the entrepreneurs whose businesses we sell. And I said, well, look, my job then today is to try and help you get better at influencing those entrepreneurs, because actually it's ethical. If you could represent more of them, you're helping them capture more value. And they went, yes, that's brilliant. Well, how can we do that? But I was amazed that if I'd said to them, what is your company's purpose? They probably wouldn't have been able to articulate it as clearly.
Right.
But when I said, like, why does this business exist? Like, what do you get? Why are you here? What's your satisfaction? Where do you get the joy from? They were very, very consistent. What was interesting is that they believed that they were selling to human beings. And so I was able to say to them, look, there's a clash here. You're selling to Marjorie or Gary or Fred, and you're helping them realize their lives, turn their life's work into cash. I said, but if I walk out of your lift, your elevator, into your reception area, I don't see pictures of Fred and his boat in Marbella. I don't see pictures of, Josh having bought a vineyard in the south of France, or I don't see any of that. What I see is these little acrylic tombstones plaques that you sold a business. I said, it feels very cold and very impersonal. I said, I think you could do a much better job linking up the way in which you speak and talk about this with the way in which your potential buyers are going to pick you as a firm. At the minute, you've got this unique purpose, which is driving everything you do, but you're showing up like everybody else. And so what they did is they actually turned one of their conference rooms into a whiskey bar and stopped doing slide decks. So now it's come down and have a cup of coffee, or come down after work and have a whiskey with us and talk to us about your business, and we'll talk to you about how we can help you.
That's amazing. It really is.
Linking that purpose then through to how you then show up, I think, can be really powerful for organizations.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and looking at the bigger picture of why we exist. I'm trying to remember the name of the book. There's a friend of mine named Bob Berg who wrote a book a number of years ago, and it's a business book about, but it's written as a novel. It's written as a story, and as part of it, there's a woman who's become an expert at making coffee. And she eventually founds a business called Rachel's Famous Coffee. And when you go into the boardroom at Rachel's Famous Coffee, do you see all of the coffee plants? Do you see, all of the production facilities and things like that? No, what she had done is sourced coffee beans from all over the world, and they had invested in those communities to help the farmers in places like Brazil and Colombia and Sumatra and places like that. And here are pictures all over the wall of all of the organizations, all of the countries that they had touched over the years. Pictures of kids, out playing in the yard, pictures of, beautiful landscapes and things like that. And so I think that's how the vision becomes reality, and what it shows really what's important about things. But when you run into those situations where you have someone who maybe had that purpose initially and they've lost it, how do you help them use that as a tool to infuse the organization, and then to see who in the organization is going to be lined up with that purpose? Because it seems to me that they're, especially if you're dealing with a fairly large organization, they're going to be people who catch the vision and people who don't catch the vision, and who perhaps need to move on to other things in their lives.
Yeah, I that definitely can happen. I think that, if vision is that sort of purpose and BHAG and core values, then there are definitely, we had one client came, and I guess their leadership team was too big. There were about 13 people in the leadership team, so too big. Because sort of every head of department was on the leadership team, but they did some work and they created their core values. And then one of them resigned the next day because he said, I've worked out that where this company's going doesn't line up with who I am. And so I'm leaving. And I think if you're if the way in which you talk about your company can't attract and repel, and I think it needs to repel some people. I think it needs to feel as though this isn't right for them. Otherwise, it's probably a bit beige. It's probably a bit blah, blah, blah. We had I work with purpose-driven organizations a lot. And one of the organizations that we spent some time with is in the UK, we have something called a multi-academy trust. So it's the public school system, but it's sort of a not-for-profit organization ends up managing a group of schools rather than the public authorities.
Mm-hmm.
And so they decided that their BHAG was to be world famous for innovation in education. And so then I said to them, how does that make you feel? And the CEO said, it makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I'm terrified. He said, like, we're 4 primary schools in Birmingham in the UK. Like, how are we going to do that? And so then they said, well, what would have to be true for that to be true? And they said, well, we would probably have some different teachers. So they then started to talk about their culture and their mission of being world famous for innovation in education. And instead of getting 30 lackluster CVs from teachers, they started to get 300 CVs from people who wanted to join their mission and were excited about innovation in education. So some teachers aren't excited about innovation in education, and some teachers are. And then during COVID, schools were closing and reopening, so they created a newsletter for some people that they shared it with a few people. Now they've got several thousand head teachers around the world on a weekly newsletter sharing innovation in education, sharing, stories about innovation in education. And so, and their goal was to be great at what they did, and you take business tools and into education. And often education thinks business is big, bad, and horrible, but some stuff around staff, particularly around staff engagement, they took some tools that we use with clients into their classrooms with their teachers. And one of the things that it enabled them to do is it really allowed them they could see where mental health issues were showing up in their teachers during COVID, and see how initiatives that they were running to try and engage their organization and engage their teachers were having in it, whether it was working in particular schools and particular departments across the schools that they looked after. And they wanted to build enough of a bow wave that they would end up being able to attract more schools, because they can't go buy a school. A school has to want to join them, like opt out of control of local authority control or move from. And so they've been able to almost double. They sort of were 4, and I think they're now 7 schools. And so, so they set their 3-year goal, and it's all purpose and values driven. And they've been able to get where they wanted to get to and their purpose is to create amazing human beings, in that sort of primary school years, sort of up to 12, how to take somebody, often these are kids in inner city areas without English as a first language, and how to set them up for success in future lives. And so I think I love being involved in projects like that with clients, because then I am able to, I don't know, their success, live their life vicariously through them. Like here are some tools that I know how to use, and then they do all the work. I'm just the coach, but they then have a huge impact on in their communities in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a fabulous thing, because you're not only adding tremendous value using the tools that you use, but at the same time, you're impacting positively a very important part of the world. Because when you stop and think about it, when you think about education, what's more important than raising our children and making sure that they're equipped with the skills, and not only just imparting to them the skills, but that they're in an environment where they have a passion for learning, and that passion, if you can instill it in them when they're very young, will serve them tremendously well for the rest of their lives.
Yes, well, and it's also the same with, I suppose, with in a lot of clients we work with, people get promoted to be managers without necessarily having any training to be a manager.
Yes.
You know, I think you know, salespeople might get trained to be salespeople, and I guess doctors get trained to be doctors. And then you think, okay, well, what about managers? Oh no, you've been here a while. You're the most senior person. We'll make you the manager. We won't give you any training though. And then, you know, then hiring. How do you create a culture if you know, for me, that sort of vision, purpose, BHAG, mission, core values, you know, this is our culture. Let's be deliberate about creating a culture. And then when we hire people, they're either making a contribution to or detracting from the culture we're trying to get. And again, we give people no skill, no skill transfer, no framework to hire great people. And then somewhere we look at it and we go, how did those people get in here?
Yes.
You know, where did they come from? And it's like, well, we didn't have a plan, so they got in.
Well, it's interesting. I'll tell you a quick story about that. There is a company here on the East Coast of the United States that it's called Bozzuto's, and they manage, they either own or manage apartment buildings throughout the Northeast, from Washington, D.C. all the way to Boston. And my middle daughter, when she was going to graduate school, excuse me, moved into one of the Bozzuto properties. And I was tremendously impressed with the way they handled things. I mean, I could literally not be in her apartment building for 3 months. And when I walked through the front door, the concierge at the front desk would say, "Oh, hi, Mr. Smith. Very nice to see you today. Ashley's in her apartment. Would you like me to let her know you're on your way up?" And just a very, very cordial, very nice environment. Well, when she finished grad school and moved to Boston, she moved into another Bozzuto property. And I found that the business model there was exactly the same. They treated everybody the same way. The customer service was just amazing. And then my oldest daughter, who was living in New York City at the time, moved to Boston, and she moved into yet another Bozzuto property. And and the model there was exactly the same. And so I finally met the property manager at the third property where my oldest daughter was living. And I said, okay, you know, once is nice, two is sort of a coincidence, three is on purpose. How is it that you guys are creating this consistency across your organization? And she said, it comes from our CEO. And I said, well, what message is he communicating to you? And he said, stop and think about it. Most people hire a resume, but when they fire somebody, they fire a personality. Hire the personality. Find the people who have a heart for serving others, whether it's people at the front desk, whether it's the maintenance people in our facility. We can help them get the skills that they need, but you can't teach people how to care about other people. And she said, that's the whole business model. That's the vision that our company is built on, is surrounding our clients, our residents in our facilities with people who have a heart for serving them. And I think that's a powerful example of, you know, just exactly what you're saying, because you don't want to be in a position of sitting back and saying, how in the world did these people ever get here? You need to be screening based on, this is the culture of our organization. These are our values, and we're looking for people who align with who we are.
Absolutely. Well, I chatted to Horst Schultz, who was the founder of Ritz-Carlton Hotel Group. And he was talking to me about daily huddles that happen in his hotels. And I said, but you're the COO. Like, how do you know how the daily huddles play out in your hotels? And he said, well, I would open the hotels and I would go and hire the 350 people that we would put in a hotel when we opened, all of them myself. He said, I would know, you know, and our employees are quite sticky. And he said that, so then I'd go and visit the hotel, and he said, I'd know these people. And they put in these service mantras. And one is show, don't point. And they've also got this, you know, because it's men and women, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. They as part of their service mantra, or what they can do is they can, everybody's got up to $2,000 that they can spend if they find a client problem that that they need to solve. And so the point, the show don't point is really, if you say, Dom, hello Dominic, could you tell me where the spa is? Instead of saying, oh, it's over there, I take you to the spa. Mm-hmm. I can then say, hey Gary, how you doing? Where are you from? Oh, you're in from Connecticut. Oh, right, brilliant. How long are you here for? You with your family? Da, 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 da. Is everything going all right for you? And you say, well, there's just this one thing, right? And I then get to find out what that one thing is, and I get to fix it. And you have so I have to want to be the type of person who wants to have that conversation and gets a kick out of solving that problem. So, otherwise you'd be the wrong person to get hired. And so I just thought it was fascinating that he took, he'd hired all of these people himself, and he knew that was the number one thing that made the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain, what it was.
Excellent. Excellent. As we sort of start to wind down here, Dom, there is one other subject that I want to talk about, and you've talked about it a little bit, but that is that on the one hand, we have purpose. On the other hand, we have our belief systems, our core values and things like that. And one of the things I talk a lot about is that there has to be congruence between those two, because if not, what we wind up doing is we wind up butting heads with ourselves. But from an organizational perspective, how do you get the leaders, once they've uncovered their purpose and their core values and that sort of thing, how do you get them to not only effectively communicate that to their organizations, but to constantly keep it alive?
Well, one of the things I say to them is, look, if you're going to have a Christmas party, say, or a holiday party, and the staff aren't lampooning you at the holiday party because you've repeated this over and over and over and over again, then you haven't said it enough, just to give them the sense that they're going to get bored of saying this long before it has sunk in. One of the other things we do is if I think about the cascade, we'll say, what's your purpose? What's your BHAG? What are your core values? And then what I quite like to do is, if we've got a core value, I think those core values are often placeholders for behaviors. And so, if you have a set of core values, quite often, if I'm facilitating this with clients, those core values will be a series of one words. Mm-hmm. So say we've got 3 core values. Well, in that case, we might have 9. Each core value might be a shorthand for maybe 3 behaviors. And so we've then got maybe 9 behaviors in the organization. And I say, okay, now tell me a story about somebody how that behavior is exactly like you want it to be. So now we've got 9 stories that we can tell when we're onboarding new employees, 9 stories that we can tell throughout the organization. And also the values are worthless unless we're firing for lack of fit. Mm-hmm. And so you've then got, here's 9 stories around how people have done it amazingly well, and we're going to repeat them over and over again. And we're going to have the company version. So when they're told properly, they're told these are the facts that we get across. And then when people leave, I think No Rules by the guy at Netflix, Hastings. He says, look, often organizations don't say why somebody got fired, mm-hmm. but actually, if it's for a behavioral or a values miss, then you should say, you should be a learning opportunity for people inside the organization. Fred had certainly at Netflix, he booked himself a first-class flight, didn't need to be a first-class flight. That's a values miss. He's not here anymore because let's learn from it. But there's a great example of a client I've worked with, Macquarie Telecom Group in Australia. And what the story that they tell all the time is somebody rings into their support desk for mobile phone support. And the gentleman says, look, my wife is flying abroad. And I know she hasn't done global roaming. And I know once you're abroad, her phone won't work. Is there anything you can do? And the young lady on the desk says, okay, well, what's her name? What's the airport? What's the gate? What's the flight? What time is it? Blah, blah, blah. Gets a phone out the drawer, puts in a SIM card, gets in a taxi, goes to the airport, finds his wife and says, your husband rang up. He was concerned you wouldn't have done this. Here's a phone, global roaming enabled. Have a great trip. The customer wasn't a mobile. The customer wasn't a mobile phone customer. Was a customer, but didn't take mobile phones from them. And so they tell that story all the time, because it's like, what we want you to do is we want you to think customer first. And we want to think, is there anything you can do to solve the problem? It's not a thing you need to talk to your manager about. It's just, here you are, customer has a problem. It's very much like Ritz-Carlton. And, you know, they very deliberately several years ago said, we're going to measure our success using Net Promoter Score. And if you're in their building, there are monitors everywhere that shows the Net Promoter Score for finance is this, the Net Promoter Score for sales is this, every department has a Net Promoter Score, and the company has its own. They've got, as a telephone provider, they've almost got zero attrition, which is amazing, customer attrition. And they take it really seriously, and that's all. There's a sort of an external measure which is linked to their profitability over time, which is then linked to how they hire, which is absolutely linked. And the purpose of that organization, when David set that business up with telephone deregulation in Australia, it was, we are going to make a difference in a market that is traditionally underserved and overcharged. And I did some work with them a few years ago where they weren't sure whether their purpose was still correct, or maybe that people didn't believe it was still correct. And so we did a number of workshops, and we came to the conclusion that the purpose still worked. They're not just in telephony now; they're in cloud infrastructure support as well, and networking and connectivity. And they realized that actually their purpose was still absolutely still true, and they could still draw a really golden thread all the way through that purpose, their core values, their recruitment, the measure of their customer delight using Net Promoter Score, and their financial performance.
Yeah, that's
so you're absolutely right. That congruency is absolutely vital.
Yeah, and I think hand in hand with that is the empowerment of people. Once they're on board with that process, is empowering them and trusting them to do what's right, and not ever putting them in a situation, or minimally putting them in a situation, well, wait a minute, I need to go talk to my manager. I had a situation a number of years ago where I have an iPhone, and I dropped my iPhone and cracked the screen, and totally my fault. So I went to the iPhone store, to the Apple store, and walked in and held the phone up to the associate, and he said, "Oh yeah, we get that quite often." And I said, "Well, gee, why is that?" And he said, "It's the part of the manufacturing process of the glass." He said, the glass tends to be full of stresses, and so if you hit it just at the right angle, it cracks. And I said, "Well, I need to get a new screen." And he said, "Well, unfortunately, we don't do it that way." He said, "But give me just a minute." And he walks into the back office and comes out a couple of minutes later and hands me a new phone. And I said, "I have to buy a new phone?" And he said, "No." He said, "I'll take your old phone. We've got a high-speed data transfer cable here. Transfer the data over. You walk out with a new phone." And I said, "Did you have to go back and get your manager's permission to do that?" And he said, "No, absolutely not." He said, "That's my decision." He said, I'm empowered to make those decisions. And I said, "But that's like a $700 phone." And he said, "Yeah, so," and it's achieving that level of empowerment. There's another company here in Connecticut called Stu Leonard's. It happens to be a chain of grocery stores. And if you go into their store, up on the wall, right as you walk through the door, is Stu's rules. And rule number 1 says the customer is always right. Rule number 2 says, if you ever think the customer is wrong, read rule number 1 again. But having that and infusing that through the organization, so that so that people are constantly taking care of. And like you said, with the example of, of the Ritz-Carlton, looking for ways, show, don't point, engage with people, get to know the people there, find out what they're enjoying, find out what they're struggling with, and do what you can to make it better. That's what builds successful organizations.
I've got one other thing, which is, I think if you and I wanted to map out a company culture, all we would need to do is go and visit the executive team meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so if people don't think their culture is where they'd like it to be, then just look at where the gap is in the behaviors that they would like in their team, and how they behave as an executive team in their executive team meetings.
That is absolutely true, because it flows down from there. People are going to take the clue from their leaders. And when they see their leaders walking in harmony and walking in integrity and living out the core values and the purpose that they espouse every day, one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to get on board with that and follow the example that's being set, or they're going to realize that they're not a good fit for this organization. They're not well aligned, and they're going to find a job somewhere else.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Dom, thanks so much for taking time to be with me today. This has been delightful. We could go on for several hours talking about this. And I appreciate both your wisdom and your passion for the work that you do. So as we close today, take just a minute and tell everybody how they can connect with you.
monkhouseandcompany.com. There's a load of resources on there. The podcasts are on there, blogs on there. You can connect to me on there, or LinkedIn.
Wonderful.
And I'd be delighted to chat with anybody if I can help in any way.
Well, I hope you get a chance to come back to the U.S. and be here on the East Coast. I'd love to be able to have dinner with you if you're in New York or Boston or something like that. So stay in touch, and hopefully we'll connect face to face one of these days. Dominic Monkhouse, thank you so much for being with me today. Real pleasure.
Gary, my pleasure.
If you enjoyed what you just watched in my conversation with Dom, please take a moment to hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel so that you'll be notified whenever we publish new content. Also, please feel free to leave a comment about what you learned, or maybe a question that you'd like to have answered in the future. I love interacting with my audience. I always respond personally, and I really hope that I can add more and more value to your life's journey. Thanks again for joining us. I'll see you next time. Until then, God bless.